I caught my parents trying to set me up with my ex's brother so they could fix things, which sounds like the kind of scheme you hear whispered over potato salad at a church picnic and laugh off as folklore. Except I'm the folklore, I'm the potato salad, and I'm also Amelia, 32. A city planner who spends her days sketching bike lanes and stormwater gardens and her nights trying to retrofit her heart with the same quiet logic she uses on intersections that don't know how to behave. The text came from my mother as a photo first, because she is a visual learner when it comes to chaos. In the picture, a table set for 4, candles, cloth napkins folded into swans we only see on holidays, my grandmother's plates that come out like celebrities. The caption read, "Small dinner tonight. Come around 6. Wear something you feel beautiful in." Nothing chills me like that last sentence. My mother uses "wear something you feel beautiful in" the way fire marshals use tape, to mark the scene. I called her. She answered on the first ring with her company voice. "Millie. What's the occasion?" "Oh, we never see you. Your father marinated salmon like a scientist. Also, someone we know is in town. A friend of the family." "Who?" "A nice young man. You've met." "How young?" She sniffed into the phone. "Don't be suspicious. Be spontaneous. Wear the green dress." The green dress is the one I bought after my breakup to prove to myself that color still existed. It swishes. It announces. It is not for stealth missions into parental schemes. I said I'd come because part of being a planner is believing in the myth that if I show up I can reroute traffic. Then I texted my best friend Priyanka, "I think I'm about to be ambushed by a casserole." When I pulled up, their house smelled like lemon oil in the 70s, the way it always does when my father is pretending calm by polishing wood. I stepped inside and immediately saw the second plate of dessert forks. 4 place settings. A 5th plate hovered on the sideboard like a thought they weren't sure they'd need. My mother emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron that said "Bless this mess" in a font that lied. She hugged me in that tight, checking for fractures way. My father appeared behind her with a dish towel flung over his shoulder like he was about to audition for the role of responsible patriarch. We did the usual pre-dinner waltz. "How's work? How's the Riverwalk project? How's your neighbor's noisy dog? We should really go to that food truck you like." The doorbell rang. I knew before she opened the door. There's a frequency only dread hits. She swung it wide and there stood Noah. Noah is the brother of my ex, Evan. If Evan was a storm with good hair, charismatic, kinetic, excellent at knocking power out of rooms, Noah is a porch light, steady, late-blooming, warm, the kind of glow you don't notice until a moth decides to live there. We had been orbiting each other for years as a footnote. At family barbecues when I was with Evan, he was the one making sure the grill didn't molt into a dragon. At Christmas, he was the one who remembered which aunt liked ginger ale and which liked a dash of something stronger. When Evan and I imploded publicly spectacularly with a side of "what if I'm not the marrying kind" delivered under twinkle lights, Noah had hugged me in the driveway and said, "I'm sorry," like the sentence had been waiting its whole life to be useful. Now he stood in my parents' hallway holding a bottle of wine, eyes widening like someone had just told him the word surprise contained a trap. "Amelia," he said. I didn't. "I mean, hi." "Noah," I said, and my mother, who loves to narrate other people's lives, clapped her hands once as if to start the scene. "Isn't this nice?" she breathed, ushering us toward the dining room like a cruise director with an eye for calamity. "Everyone who needs to be here is here." We Saturday. My father poured wine with the solemnity of a sacrament. My mother produced the salmon. Conversation tiptoed around the obvious until my mother, unable to leave a bow untied, said, "We thought it would be healing to reconnect. We're all adults." "Mom," I said. "What?" "I'm saying life is short." She looked at Noah. "Isn't life short, dear?" "I work nights," he said gently. "I have an intimate relationship with that concept." "Oh, you are still at St. Gertrude's?" my father asked, pouncing on the safe subject. "We read about your hospital in the paper." "It was a blood drive," Noah said, and smiled like the word was a private joke. We ate. Salmon submitted to forks. Potatoes behaved. The green beans snapped. My mother asked about floodplain maps. I answered because I will talk about culverts until the cows come home, and then I will talk about how we kept them from drowning. Noah asked good questions in the way people do who are used to listening for vital signs. How do you convince a city to change a street, he asked. By telling a better story than the one the asphalt tells, I said. His gaze flickered like a pilot light. Then, like a director who can't stand subtext, my mother leaned forward, her bracelets gathering bravery. You two were always, how do I put this, she fluttered, compatible. Mom, I said again, warning wrapped in gratitude because she had said we're not What? She threw me a look. You like the same food. You both value family. You both remember birthdays. That's a foundation. Mom, we're not a zoning overlay, I said. You can't just repurpose us. Noah's mouth did that thing it does when it's trying not to laugh at something tender. Mrs. Hart, he said, I came because you asked and because your text sounded like a code and because I honestly wanted to see how you're both doing. I didn't come to fix things, my father finished for him, as if the phrase had been written in icing on the counter. But we'd be lying if we said we didn't hope something good might come of being together again. He looked at me, and the years of him teaching me how to change a tire and read a tape measure and take the first pancake for myself hovered between us. We love you, he said to me, and then to Noah, we love you like, he opened his hands helplessly, like a son who stayed after the fire drill. Noah looked at his plate. I looked at my mother's hand on the table, the one that had held my fever forehead through every childhood flu, the one that had signed every permission slip. I thought of all the little ways parents try to control weather because they can't control time. I thought of the ridiculous day I was having. Okay, I said, because sometimes the only way out is through. I want to be clear. Nobody here is a wrench for old pipes. There's nothing to fix. There is a lot to feel. And I'm feeling some of it, but I will not be a project you two manage like a kitchen renovation. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it, perhaps for the first time in her life choosing the teaspoon of restraint over the ladle. Noah looked relieved and something else, curious maybe about a conversation that could be honest and stay seated. For what it's worth, he said, addressing the salt shaker in the way of shy men everywhere, I've always liked you. Not in the cinematic sense where I've been carrying a torch while chopping onions in the background of your life. He smiled. But in the regular sense where I notice the way you take a walk around the block when you're upset instead of letting the feeling rent the whole apartment. The way you talk about streets like they're people. The way you let people be bad at first drafts. His ears pinked. I'm not here for my brother, he added. And I'm not here for your parents. I'm here because they asked, and because when they said your name out loud again, I realized I missed the sound of it in rooms I don't have a reason to stand in. I pretended to need more water because the alternative was audibly melting. In the kitchen my mother followed, whisper hissing like a pressure cooker. See? See? His perfect. Stop matchmaking me like I'm an inherited china set, I whisper hissed back. You don't get to curate my heartbreak. She deflated against the fridge. We were afraid, she said. After Evan, you stopped bringing anything home. Even laundry. We didn't know how to sit with a daughter we couldn't do anything for. She pressed her palm to the magnet where we keep emergency numbers. I thought if we could guide you, maybe we could skip to the part where you're happy again. You can't fast-forward me, I said, softer because the monster eating her was love with a bad posture. Also, you don't trust my judgment anymore. She began, then blinked at the truth between us. I trusted the wrong boy, she admitted. It landed like a confession I hadn't known I needed. He looked shiny. He said the right things in the kitchen. He stacked the dishwasher. He fooled us. I'm still mad that I liked him. She swallowed. I don't want to get fooled again. Noah doesn't feel like a trick. Because he isn't one, I said. But he's also not a shortcut. We went back to the table and finished dinner like human beings who had all just seen each other's lungs. When it was over, Noah stood, thanked my parents, and asked me if I wanted to walk. My mother watched us like a director blessed with chemistry on set. My father told her with his eyes to go wash a pan. We walked without touching down the street I grew up on, past the pear tree that never produces a pear, past the house with the gargoyles that everyone pretends is whimsical. He kept his hands in his coat pockets. I kept mine busy tracing the seam of the sidewalk with my toe. The air had that almost snow smell. "I'm sorry they did that," I said. "I didn't know until the salmon showed up wearing evening wear." He laughed. "Your mom called me 3 times," he admitted. "The first time I said no. The second time I said let me think. The third time I said yes and asked if I should bring dessert, and she said if I touched her lemon tart recipe she'd put me in a shallow grave behind the azaleas." "That's accurate," I said. "You're brave to face the tart." He walked a few steps in silence. "Can I say something that might mess up the vibe?" he asked. "Sure." "I'm not my brother." "I know." And I did. It's one of the reasons I'd been wary, to be honest, because what if my heart couldn't tell the difference? What if my old map tried to overlay onto new streets and called that destiny when it was really laziness? "You don't have to perform his shadow for me," I added. "Good," he said. "Because I'm bad at parties, decent at making a decent egg, and I have a plant I've kept alive for 6 years out of spite. That's the package." He glanced at me. "Also, if this is a thing, this you and me, it has to be because we choose it. Not because anyone believes we solve anything by standing in the same frame." "Agreed," I said, my breath ghosting. "And if it's not a thing, then we can say goodnight having survived a miracle, an UN disastrous ambush by parents." We reached the end of the block where the streetlights pooled like warm coins. "Coffee sometime?" he asked, voice careful. "Like in daylight without assigned seating." "Coffee sounds like a verb I can conjugate," I said. "But my boundary is this: no family intel. I don't want to know who Evan's dating or how he takes his espresso now or whether he finally learned that trick where you check the smoke alarm batteries. I'm not interested in third-person omniscience." He nodded, immediate. "Copy that. My boundary: no pretending we're not complicated. I like plain language." "Deal." We shook hands like a ridiculous contract, and the electricity that passed between us felt like something I hadn't felt since I discovered maps as a kid. The sense that routes exist even when you don't know them yet, that you can learn a city by walking it. Our first coffee happened at the cafe near the river where the barista draws swans in foam as if auditioning for art school. He wore a navy sweater and nerves. I wore that green dress under a parka because I am a woman who layers her optimism. We talked in the way people do when they've been politely adjacent for a decade and suddenly are allowed to be their whole messy selves. What we read, what we're bad at, what we've forgiven in other people, what we haven't yet forgiven in ourselves. He told me a story about a night shift where a patient's daughter sang Moon River to her father with a voice like a bridge you can drive a truck over. I told him about a meeting where I convinced a room full of men in ties to give up 3 parking spaces for a pocket park by comparing it to lungs for a neighborhood. He laughed and looked impressed in the way that doesn't feel like a trophy so much as a mirror. We began to see each other on purpose. Small things: a walk by the canal, a trip to the bodega where the cat thinks it owns pickles, a Sunday morning where I let him choose the playlist and he chose sad 70s songs and then apologized for the accordion. We were careful, not because of ghosts but because we wanted our pace to be ours. My parents, to their credit, zipped their mouths most days. My mother slipped exactly once, texting me a photo of a sweater with the caption "Noah would look good in this," and I replied with a photo of a stop sign and she sent back 3 prayer hands and a cookie. Evan found out because the world is a small dinner party where someone always knows the host. He sent a 1-sentence text, "I heard." No punctuation, like he'd run out of them in his 20s. I didn't answer because not every bell deserves to be rung. Noah showed me his phone with the same text. "We're not doing triangulation," he said, and I wanted to kiss him in a grocery aisle for using the right word. The first time we kissed, it was not a symphony. It was my tiny kitchen, after he'd installed a magnetic strip for my knives like a love letter to competence. We were standing close to admire the engineering and then I was admiring his mouth. It was soft and aware and made me think of secret handshakes 12-year-olds invent to prove they exist to each other. We laughed in the middle of it because my dog sneezed and because something in both of us needed to register that joy could be silly. We introduced each other to the parts of our days that don't make it to Instagram. His laundry day, where half his socks mourn their partners. My Sunday night ritual of cutting vegetables in advance like a love note to Wednesday. He showed me the plant he'd kept alive, a scruffy ficus named Bronte. I showed him my collection of aerial maps, cities seen from above like puzzles that finally admitted their edges. My parents behaved like people who had been visited by an angel named Humility. They invited us to dinner twice, and each time my mother's eyes did a little happy lightning, but she kept it to the weather and to my father's quest to achieve potato perfection. After the second dinner, she pulled me aside. "I'm sorry," she said, hands twisting her bracelet, "for making you a project." "Thank you," I said. "I accept your apology. Here's what I need. If this ends, you don't pick sides. If this continues, you don't pick names for our children on a napkin until we ask you for a list." "Ha," she said, wounded that I could read her napkins, then kissed my forehead. "Deal." It didn't end. It deepened, in the way rivers deepen when spring arrives without fanfare and the thaw remembers its job. We were careful not to make our history our habitat. When we ran into Evan at a street festival, because of course the universe playing bingo had our names, Noah nodded, I nodded, Evan nodded, and then the three of us continued along our separate booths like adults who know the difference between an origin story and a destination. Later in the car I said, "That was weird," and Noah said, "That was weird," and we laughed until my stomach hurt because calling a thing what it is steals its power to narrate you. A year later, I stood with Noah at the edge of the river I'd argued into a new bike path for, and he said, "Do you want to marry me?" like a question asked to someone whose answers he values even when they don't match his own. I said yes because the story we built had more verbs than adjectives. My mother behaved like a saint with a Pinterest board she kept in a vault. My father practiced his speech on the dog. Evan sent a card that said, "Congratulations," which I accepted the way you accept a weather report, noted. At the reception, after my father made everyone cry with a memory of teaching me to ride a bike on a cul-de-sac that still bears my skid marks, my mother tapped her glass and said, "I once tried to set up two excellent people for the wrong reasons. Tonight I am here to admit I was wrong about the reasons and right about the people." People laughed and dabbed and drank and ate cake. I danced with Noah to a slow song that felt like a street at midnight, no traffic, all possibility. He whispered, "Thank you for letting us be us," into my hair. I whispered, "Thank you for insisting on truth," into his collar. We left the party under a sky that risked a handful of stars despite the city glow, my green dress catching wind like a flag. In the car, he reached over, found my hand on the console and squeezed it twice. "Our code for "Are you here?" I squeezed back twice. "Our code for "I'm here." I'm Amelia, 32, I build routes for a living and I took the long one home. My parents learned that love can't be engineered like a seating chart. My ex learned somewhere offstage how to send a decent card. My dog learned that 2 laps are better than 1. And I learned that nothing needed fixing. It needed naming, pacing, and permission to grow in the direction that made sense for the people actually living inside the story. If you need me, I'll be on the Riverwalk, counting how many times a stranger smiles at a flowerbed we fought for and thinking how lucky I am that when my life reached a 4-way stop I didn't blow the sign. I looked both ways, then chose the road that let me breathe.